This is a very special session as it will feature keynote presentations offered by the honorable heads of the National Security Division's Advisory Board think tanks. These esteemed heads will be sharing with us valuable findings from their in-house discussions on various aspects of national security, following which there will be a panel discussion carried out by our esteemed discussants. I would now like to call upon the discussant panel first, which will be followed by individual keynote presentations by the esteemed heads of the advisory board think tanks. They'll be called in no particular order. To begin with, this panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Huma Baqai, Associate Professor, Institute of Business Administration, Karachi, and also a visiting senior fellow at the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. I request you to please come on stage. I would also like to request the esteemed panelists of this session to please come on stage. Hafiz Tahir Ashrafi Sahab, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on Religious Harmony and Chairman, Ulema Council, Pakistan. Dr. Adil Najam, Boston University. Dr. Zeba Sathar, Director, Population Council's Office. Ms. Aisha Khan, Founder and Executive Director for the Civil Society Coalition for Climate Change and CEO of Mountain and Glacier Organization. I now call upon the esteemed heads of the advisory board think tanks in no particular order. To begin with, I would like to inform that Ambassador Nadeem Riaz is unable. He is the president of Institute of Regional Studies. He's unable to join us today as he's not feeling well. So we will be having Ms. Nabila Jafar on his behalf sharing the findings of the esteemed think tank. Thank you.
It is an honor for IRS to be part of the second Islamabad Security Dialogue. Towards citizen-centric national security is a joint session in which IRS is focusing on population. The scheme of the presentation is evaluation of the current situation, and then we analyzed challenges of population growth as a security risk, and then we are presenting policy recommendations. And the inputs in this study are based on in-depth consultations with experts and relevant stakeholders and analyzing of data from population growth, maternal health, youth education, employment, food security, climate change, and natural disasters. And now I have some highlights of the current situation of population. Pakistan's current population is around 228 million with an average growth of around 2% annually, and we are the fifth most populated country with a deteriorating human development ranking that is 154th among 189 countries, and our population is expected to surpass 300 million by 2050. And then we have the challenges of unemployment. Unemployment rate for Pakistan is 4.6%. Poverty rate stands at 21.5%, and 44 million people in Pakistan are undernourished and food insecure, and we are ranked at 92 on Global Hunger Index. And population impacts our economy, food security, water resources, youth employment, and has severe impact on the country's overall security. And the issues of governance, inadequate delivery systems, financial limitations, education, internal migration for economic and security has led to unmanageable mega cities. And then we have weak health system, high birth rate, women health, premature death, and stunting remains a major challenge. And now we can correlate population with security because of the additional challenges. We have tense relations with our neighbors, which we can call as our geographical compulsions. And this kind of like the growing population can lead us to conflict over resources within and beyond borders. And that can also lead to internal and external migration, disruption of political and societal fabric, and social cultural diversity and unequal income distribution can also lead to radicalization of the underutilized youth. The point we are trying to make is that the increasing imbalance in resources and the growing population is actually making this population is a security risk for Pakistan, because we have diminishing capacities and increasing vulnerabilities. Now I come to our third part, which is policy recommendations. Number one is security prism, as population must be viewed through the security prism, and its significance as a security issue should lead us to integrate it in cross-sectoral macro and micro level policies. Whenever this population issue comes up, we try to view it through socio-economic angles, and here we are emphasizing that this must be viewed through the security prism. And then the second most important thing is population sustainability. Population sustainability includes two aspects. One is population control and the other one is population management. Population management is also very, very important because we need to convert the existing population into an asset. And for this thing, the primary concentration should be on the minimization of population growth rate through running public awareness campaigns, using social media, strengthening infrastructure for birth control, and providing material such as contraceptives and trained human capital. And for this thing, we cannot ignore the aspect of like taking religious scholars on board for reduced birth programs. And another thing that our experts came up was they came up with a suggestion that family planning centers should be integrated into public health hospitals. The third one, which is also related to the second part, is women-centric population policy. And the success of population control lies in women-centric policy that include family planning initiatives, empowering women through employment and education, and there is a need to create financial opportunities for young girls, impart life skills-based education, and revamping Lady Health Visitors Program again. And the fourth one is effective poverty reduction strategy. Because poverty can also instigate high rate of population, and therefore there is a need to focus on increasing small enterprises and microcredit facilities to incorporate the poor in economic activities. And further incentives can be given to entrepreneurs for providing youth employment. And the fifth one is improve agriculture and rural economy. This is also relevant to decreasing population and addressing the population growth and converting them into an asset through improving agriculture and rural economy, which can reduce poverty, unemployment, and rapid urbanization. And there is a need to promote rural industrialization, regularize rural markets, and establish town and village enterprises to discourage rapid urbanization problems. And the sixth one is the education, because we cannot ignore education. It has direct and indirect impact on the population growth. There is a need to revamp the existing curriculum, introduce vocational training and language training skills to make the youth competitive in domestic and international markets. And then the seventh one is another most important suggestion, that is legislation. The country requires new legislation on women reproductive health, early marriages, child labor, water security, climate impact, development of cities, and utilization of natural resources. Here we conclude these policy inputs by reiterating that population growth rate should be arrested. If left unchecked, it will become a security threat in given internal and external dynamics. Need of the hour are pragmatic development plans with an integrated approach based on cross-sectoral reforms and legislations with the consensus of all relevant stakeholders, including religious factions. And here it concludes. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am, for your keynote presentation. On behalf of the Ambassador, I now welcome Director General, Institute for Strategic Studies, Research and Analysis, National Defense Universities, Major General Ehsan Mehmood Khan, PhD, Hilal-e-Imtiyaz, Military. I request you to please come on stage for your keynote presentation, sir.
Distinguished discussants, panelists, speakers, respectable ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. It's great to represent National Defense University here, and as has already been introduced, I am heading ISRA, the Institute for Strategic Study, Research and Analysis, the leading think tank displayed on both sides, part of Advisory Board of National Security Division, and first compliments from National Defense University for holding such a well-planned, well-organized and well-conducted Islamabad security dialogue. And certainly we and our complete team was also part of it, that is representing here. But then again, complete team of National Security Division headed by National Security Advisor deserves compliments and appreciation. Now coming down to our part, one of the 8 sections of publicly distributed national security policy deals with human security and anti-ISDs, non-traditional security threats. Now we were told to hold a roundtable conference on this, which we held in ISRA, National Defense University, on 25th of March 2022. And ladies and gentlemen, it was well represented, and distinguished scholars and speakers, and both scholars and practitioners from all across Pakistan participated in it. We had a lengthy discussion, and I have been told to take 3 to 5 minutes to come up with the findings and recommendations of this roundtable discussion. Now, as it goes, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk of human security came up in the aftermath, the concept of human security came up in the aftermath of disintegration of former USSR and Cold War indeed. And normative paradigm to human security was given from UNDP's platform by our very own Dr. Mahbub al-Haq, and in 1997 in its UNHDR Human Development Report, and it talks of 7 sections or sub-themes of human security, and they are political security, economic security, food security, health security, personal security, community security, and environmental security. Now, this concept of human security is context specific, environment specific, and country specific. It has to be Pakistan specific when it comes down to the realm of implementation and execution to an environment. And in that case, National Security Policy of Pakistan 2022 identifies 5 different areas, and they are population growth and migration, health security, climate and water stress, food security, and gender security. Now, it does not at all mean that remaining section or remaining parts of human security are not being covered herein, or they have not been given a priority. Different other sections, other 7 sections actually address all those, including internal security. Now, coming straight down to the findings of our discussion that we had on 25th of March this year, the first and foremost is, ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution of Islamic Republic of Pakistan provides for human security. and it can be aptly, now this was one of the major findings of our discussion, and it can aptly be called national security doctrine of Pakistan. And all its chapters, all its sections, and particularly chapter 1, fundamental rights, actually takes care of all facets and all realms of human security in Pakistan. And finding 2, the philosophy of Pakistan, the founding fathers of Pakistan, and the theory, two-nation theory, which Pakistan was founded on, actually a theory that points to human security. And that is why, let me read it for you, the purpose of national security as per national security policy that has been issued, and it says, a country is as secure as its most vulnerable citizen. I say again, a country is as secure as is its most vulnerable citizen. The safety, security, dignity, and prosperity of citizens in all their manifestations will remain the ultimate purpose of national security of Pakistan. And this denotes that human security remains at the center stage of Pakistan's national security policy. And then we found out that geoeconomics, when we talk of geoeconomics, which has a dire linkage, an absolute linkage with all forms of security in Pakistan, both traditional and non-traditional, has to take care of locational attribute of Pakistan, and indeed has to capitalize on locational attribute of Pakistan. And then, ladies and gentlemen, good governance is key to addressing both traditional and non-traditional security threats. And we also found out, and we also discussed, that all that used to be traditional is not much traditional today, and all that used to be non-traditional is not much non-traditional today. It is very much in tradition today, and indeed everything that we are talking of is traditional, and everything that we talk of indeed is of paramount importance for security of Pakistan, both in national, state, and human terms. Ladies and gentlemen, we also found out that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries in climate change, most affected by climate change, and we need to take measures both in the realm of mitigation and adaptation. And food security, we need to take care of complete triad of food security: availability, accessibility, and affordability in Pakistan. And we need to go back to the kind of agriculture we used to have in the making years of Pakistan. And ladies and gentlemen, in the end, we found out that human security is about 3 E's. When we talk of an individual, me, you, all of us, it's education, economy, and equity. And I got 3 special messages from the panelists who asked me to communicate those messages here. Number 1, we have to reform our civilian institutions. We will have to reform our police. We will have to reform our civil service and bureaucracy. We have to put it right, and we have to bring it up to the expectations of 21st century environment. And only if we are able to do, we would be able to take care of the second aspect, and that is implementation and execution of national security policy. And the third aspect, and the last one, and this is concluding remark, ladies and gentlemen, if we need to take care of Pakistan's national security, if we need to take care of traditional and non-traditional security threats, if we need to take care of human security in Pakistan, if we need to really implement this document in letter and content and in letter and spirit, Just one word, governance, governance and governance. You call it security governance, you call it administrative governance, you call it energy governance, you call it economic governance. In the end, it is governance that is going to take care of all kind of securities. So governance, governance and governance, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for your keynote presentation. Just a short announcement. I request the esteemed heads to kindly try and limit the presentation time to 3 to 5 minutes, as one of our discussants is facing an emergency situation due to which they may have to leave earlier. So it's a request to kindly slightly limit the timing of the presentation. I now welcome former Ambassador Mr. Aizaz Ahmad, Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. I request you to please come on stage for your keynote presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to National Security Division team for a job very well done. Now, the challenge is to sum up for you on a topic as broad and incisive as economic security and geoeconomics in 3 minutes, which I'll try to do. Now, we held a seminar which was attended by one former federal finance minister, one provincial finance minister, one expert from SDPI, one from BNU, another from NSPP, and a few other think tanks. So there was a broad-based composition. The general points that the speakers made were that a strong economy helps generate prosperity, provides for robust defense, and makes the nation secure. In that sense, they concluded the recently announced national security policy has rightly attached primacy to economic security in the context of comprehensive national security. The other point emphasized in general was that Pakistan must attach highest priority to putting its economic house in order. And then there was a list of reforms that they listed out, which I cannot read now because of time shortage, but they said that there is no alternative to comprehensive economic reforms, howsoever painful those may be. In the evolving geopolitics with new alignments and blocks shaping up, there are both challenges and opportunities. Ideally, Pakistan should build deeper economic partnerships with China, Central Asia, and Russia, while keeping its existing economic channels functional with the US, Europe, and the other major powers. This will not be easy, however, with diplomatic finesse and the right emphasis on geoeconomics, the challenges could possibly be converted into opportunities. Now, on Pakistan's external account balance, it was stated that Pakistan's macroeconomic policy needs to shift its focus from stabilization to sustainability. They did a number of other things, but I think I'll just pause it here. But what I think begs your attention is that the focus at this time should be on SMEs, small and medium enterprises. With the right policies and environment for SMEs, our economy can create jobs and promote household savings and enhance overall inclusion of the people and the businesses. On Pakistan's regional trade and economic integration, it was stressed that mobility within the region is of critical value in order to explore the untapped trade potential within and between the regions. It is imperative to create easy border access like Europe. Actually, frankly, they would use the words like end the regional isolation and things of this sort for all the countries in South Asia. On Pakistan's industrial development, I think they say that the SEZ, Special Economic Zones, have been positive as part of CPEC's broader architecture, and its phase 2 requires increased participation from public, private, and joint public-private engagement. Then they said that while ambitious plans are good, industrialization process requires a holistic approach. A country like Pakistan can have a mixed model of import substitution and export promotion at the same time. I think we had left behind import substitution long time back, but I'm glad that we are coming back to it. And final segment was dynamics of Pakistan's human security. I think the general has already talked about it. The recent research shows that a higher share of knowledge-intensive goods in the export profile of any country yields a much higher per capita income growth. So countries can achieve knowledge-intensive export structure by investing in their own people and building a human economy. To that end, Pakistan needs to manage its population growth, something that IRS has already pointed out. And then the creation of a knowledge-based economy depends on innovation and creativity. And finally, Pakistan should also focus on linking its network of research institutions and universities with industry. Something that happened in the 60s, we saw that, to achieve a knowledge-based economy. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, sir, for your keynote presentation. I now welcome retired Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan, President of Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. I request you, sir, to please come on stage for your keynote presentation. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To cut short on timings, as covered earlier, I'll just move straight to the intro is that as a part of discussion on national cohesion, a very wide subject and a very important subject and an ingredient of national security. Without national cohesion, national security or the human security is not moving anywhere. We've had various panel discussions and conferences on this to come out with some recommendations that I'll put forward to you. I'll proceed, I'll only cover up two things. One, just list the challenges that the national cohesion is facing in Pakistan and my recommendation to eliminate or reduce the challenges. Right. Okay. I just list these challenges with question marks. As the time is short, you can have a look at it. These are only few of the challenges. The list is long as put up by the panelists. My recommendation to remove these impediments, first and foremost, human security demands a contract of an individual or a citizen with the state. We seriously need to look at our social contract with the state of a common citizen. There is a need to promote constitutional understanding. As Major Ehsan was covering, our constitution has all the provisions to make it a great cohesive nation. There is nothing no shortfall in the constitution, but there is a big issue of implementation of the constitution. So this needs to be made part of our education system, that people must be made aware of their rights. Second is, there is a lot that Qaid-e-Azam gave on his vision of the state and the people. We need to include that in the syllabi of various classes so that the new generation is aware of the concept of Pakistan. We seriously lack in terms of understanding what was the reason for creating Pakistan. Now, the economic equality or inequality that you may say, there is a need to accelerate inter-institutional data and its integration to derive benefits for planning. In our case, while there is some data in some departments, the other departments who are supposed to plan the programs ahead do not have access to this data. But if they have, they do not have it timely. So there is a need to have data management, collection and integration. There is a need to discourage the consumption-oriented economy. बड़े सादा अल्फाज में इसको showmanship कहते हैं. We see a lot of big cars on the streets. We see a lot of big houses and extra expenditure that actually creates inflation. So our inflation is also related to the consumption that we make, which could be controlled, and need to transfer this into investment and utilization for other purposes by the state. There is a need to stimulate urban renewal schemes to ensure equal distribution of resources. There is a need to promote merit-based decision-making and transparency in governance. Also talked by Major Ehsan, governance is the key. And you cannot have governance if you do not have merit-based selection and do not have transparency in the decision-making. Now, another important aspect of that affects the human security is internal security. There is a need to update the National Action Plan. This is emphasized in all our discussions. The plan was made in 2014-15, needs an update. One. Secondly, something very alarming, it needs ownership. Who owns this? Who executes this? Who monitors it? Is missing. There is a need to seek collective agreement among the political parties to cease use of religion for political gains. There is also a need to regulate foreign and local funding of all religious institutions. Initiate comprehensive de-radicalization program for all religious groups that are causing us embarrassment. I propose a comprehensive Equality Act to overrule all discriminatory laws made on the basis of religion. Take religious leaders, scholars on board and seek a firm and clear stance against extremism and terrorism. Another important subject, inter-provincial harmony. We had the 18th Amendment, supposedly for the benefits to reach the masses, which it has failed. Because the devolution did take place to the elite of the provinces. It hasn't gone down. There is a need to relook at the 18th Amendment vis-a-vis the human security. There is a need to ensure local governments and the resources must be given to the local government so the common person gets benefit of those resources. There is the need to create administrative units to ensure equitable division of resources. Another sore point, judicial system. If I'm allowed to say, it has failed to deliver to the common people. It may be doing very well for the elite. The common person has no hopes to get justice. Therefore, my recommendation is that there is a need to form a judicial commission to reform the system in totality with following specifics. Induction criteria of judges at all levels and their promotion criteria needs a relook. Adequate number of judges be made available. Surely the cases are pending in all three tiers of the judiciary because of the shortage of judges. There is a need to implement time-bound decision. The cases should not prolong for years and years. There has to be some time to every decision, particularly the one which relates to human security. Legal aid system, people cannot afford the present legal system in terms of cost. And now I'll come to last part of my presentation, recommendation. Health and education forms the weakest link of the human security in Pakistan. And gentlemen, weakest link defines the strength of the link. So these two areas, defined as basic rights of every Pakistani in the Constitution of Pakistan, are far below our expectations or far below needs. The figures that are available are daunting. We don't even spend 1/10 of what the UN wants us to spend on health. As per one of the very honorable speakers, he said, we spend $10 per person. The UN figure is $100 per person on health. And that too gets distributed in two areas. One, tertiary health system and the primary health system. The primary health system, which serves the maximum population, gets only 30% of that. 70% goes to bigger hospitals. Therefore, everybody has to rush to the bigger towns. On education side, there is a need to declare education emergency. Unfortunately, this has been talked many times in many manifestos by many politicians, but nobody has been able to implement that because political expediency demands that they only work for short term. Spending on education, if you start spend today, the results will come in 10 to 15 years. Invest in quality and affordable healthcare services. Create a budget balance, like I said, 30-70 is not right. Build and expand robust, shock, responsive social protection program. The government has done a very good job of introducing the Sehat card, which has given a big relief to a poor citizen. There is a need, I would say, to spend much more than what we are spending, and in fact, the health and education combined, we are spending only 4%. There is a need to double it if we want to have our common Pakistani feel part of the society, feel part of the nation, and contribute effectively. We need to look after the normal Pakistani. With that, I come to the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable keynote presentation. I now welcome on stage the Honorable Head of the esteemed Islamabad Policy Research Institute, affiliated with the National Security Division, Acting President, Brigadier Retired, Mr. Raashid Wali Janjua, to please come on stage to deliver his keynote address. Thank you, sir.
Honorable Discussants, National Security Advisor, ladies and gentlemen, how we create a connection between state and society so that we bind all those stakeholders into a beneficial relationship. This is the pearl of high price that we chase when we create a consensus. So the topic assigned to us, or the theme assigned, was to recommend as to how to build consensus on this national security policy, first of its kind, that has been disseminated. Coming over to preamble, Pakistan's national security policy is an overarching document which tells us what to do. Now the how part is the national security strategy that countries like the United States disseminate, and that would be the task of line ministries. And there is an inherent process of consensus building built into this whole process. Now, recognizing the need for unity, the national security policy emphasized the importance of celebrating diversity. Go to the last part, dispense with first. So the unity in diversity, that was the weight makeup that we need to integrate into our consensus building process. So we just flash what are the prerequisites for consensus building. So in our reckoning, people's buy-in is critical. Through effective communication channels to disseminate the usefulness of the policies, emphasis on human security, because people need to be convinced as to what is human security, so wider discussion, debate is required. So it should be done through a mechanism to build political and economic stakes for the people in the governance system, along with the government accountability system at the local government system where the rubber hits the ground. There's a need of a focal point at federal level to channelize and assuage the politico-economic grievances of people, employing an effective feedback mechanism. Respect of the fundamental consensus document is of prime importance, that is the Constitution of Pakistan, especially Articles 37 and 38. Ladies and gentlemen, this was very fascinating to get a tour de horizon of our Constitution, which is the basic documents, and every aspect that is enlisted, disseminated in this national security document was covered in Articles 37 and 38, which includes social justice, well-being of the people. Some of those aspects are flashed. Could you show that Article 37, please, and 38? So, this is just a small glimpse of that. Now, coming over to recommendations, while implementing guidelines of these Articles 37 and 38 of the Constitution, which would be integrated in spirit, the state shall, there's a need to promote a debate for national consensus. So that debate needs to be in the parliament, that debate needs to be in provincial legislatures, in academia, and there's a need of a central hub to assume the role of a coordinating focal point. And we recommended that that should be the focal ministry, Ministry of Interprovincial Coordination, which at the moment is lying just dormant, doing nothing. And after this 18th Amendment, the whole consensus building is premised on the idea of provinces buying into this national security and especially its human security dimensions. We feel that there should be a provincial coordination section, there should be a local government coordination section, and a panel of experts to coordinate the research and policy inputs that impact upon implementation aspects of human security. And this Ministry of Human Interprovincial Coordination, it should be given the lead role, and its capacity needs to be built for that role. Next recommendation, a robust and empowered local government system geared towards service delivery needs to be put into practice to ensure that the people become the true stakeholders into the governance. Without there being stakeholders, there would be never be any consensus. A word of caution, while celebrating the diversity of cultures, the unifying factors like common religion, a common national language, that is Urdu, and symbols of national unity like flags, emblems, and national institutions should not be deprecated, rather embraced with pride and alacrity. Ladies and gentlemen, true democratic practices need to be introduced in the internal working of party practices of all major political parties, shown of which they are mere dynastic holdovers from an anachronistic past. The role of parliamentary oversight committees should be strengthened to debate and vote on all major legislations. Furthermore, the practice of legislating through ordinances needs to be discontinued except in emergencies. Public research institutions and think tanks need to research and work on reforming the service delivery mechanisms in Pakistan, which is the warp and woof of human security. Last recommendation, to help forge consensus on NSP in the deprived regions and underdeveloped provinces such as Balochistan, Gilgit-Baltistan, there's a need to study and to map the grievances of those regions and create an amelioration detection index, which would give us a map of their grievances, and then those grievances should be tackled in a holistic and scientific manner. And additionally, the Baloch and GB voices should be given a proper forum and a proper channel to air their opinions and grievances while planning any human development strategy. So this is how, in our humble reckoning, consensus can be achieved on this document. I thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your keynote presentation. I thank all honorable heads of the esteemed advisory board think tanks affiliated with the National Security Division for taking out valuable time to deliver your insightful keynote presentations. I hand over the session proceedings to you.
Much. I must congratulate all of, the people who were responsible for the presentations that we just made. I realized a lot of work went into them. Roundtable conferences were held and the recommendations were shared with us. The topics are wide and the themes range from A to Z, but what perhaps I'm going to try and do is that allow my discussants to speak about subjects that they have an expertise on, and then a subsequent question by me, and then I'll open the section for Q&A. And I know Dr. Adil Najam Sahab, you have to leave, so I'm going to put the first question to you, which will enable us to also contextualize this discussion. All the presentations that we heard, largely if I was to use my terms of international relations, which you can immediately relate to, is that perhaps we are talking about widening of security studies. And there is also a consensus that deepening is not an option. So we're not changing the consumer of security. The consumer of security remains the state, which is critical in today's world, but we have to widen it. Widen it to what point? And then it pivots to a very critical question, that to widen this security debate, where do the resources come from? And thus the thrust of Pakistan government and the security policy to pivot Pakistan's foreign policy from perhaps geopolitics to geoeconomics. But we also know that we live in a world where there's a crisscross of geoeconomics and geopolitics, and geostrategic compulsions are becoming more pertinent by the day. In this backdrop, how do you see the construct of widening of security in Pakistan especially?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad. That's a very wide and important set of questions you've raised, and I join you in congratulating all these institutes. I think it's a brilliant idea to have these discussions in institutions that have been mostly focused on what we call traditional security, and I hope this can be continued as well as widened to other institutions and universities and colleges so that this discussion continues. By way of answering your question, let me say two things. First of all, I have spent much of the last 20 years, 2 decades, thinking, writing, teaching about human security, which means that it gives me great pleasure to see this coming to the fore. Ab ye mainstream mein aa gaya. And I was thinking about half the papers I've ever probably written, mostly on climate, have had the word human security. So I say that by context, part of me is extremely pleased when I read the national security policy, I hear this discussion. The other part, and this comes to your question, goes to the first time, my first book which had human security in its title, 2003. And my book's title was Human Security, Environment and Development, and it was well reviewed, but I was given this onslaught of critique also by my colleagues. And the critique was, and this is important, the critique was, कि यार अगर सब कुछ security है, तो फिर तो कुछ भी security नहीं, right? If everything is security, then what is security? And I think this is a very fair question. It is a very fair question for those of us who work on development, on climate, on security. And I'm not saying this is the case here, I'm saying this is the question we have to start with. It was raised in 2 of the panels this morning also. That there are also grave dangers in securitizing issues. There is possibly more resources, which is why people are attracted. People think, okay, security walas have paisa. If my issue becomes a security issue, I'll also get some of it. I'll also work more. Climate ko zyada interest ho jayega, ya population ko ho jayega, ya development ko ho jayega. I raised this question because when it was thrown at me as a critique of my work, I did understand that this is right. And in some ways, that's the most important point I want to make today. I think it is brilliant, and I think we are ahead of the curve even with other countries, to give the prominence to citizen-centered security, to give the prominence to human security that we do here. But now the question is, then what is human security? It cannot be climate security, for example, which Aisha will talk more than I will, cannot be everything about climate. फिर वो बेचारे climate ministry वाले क्या करेंगे? Right? Geoeconomics, for example, is not equal to international economics. Just like security policy is not equal to foreign policy. I'm trying to make a conceptual point. I'm sorry, Professor, ko bulayenge to yehi hoega. The point I'm making is that just like in foreign policy, there are many issues that are not security issues, but they are foreign policy issues. Similarly, in these other areas, there are certain issues which are security issues. And that to me is the essence of human security, right? Let me give you an example. First of all, what makes a security issue? All over across the world, what makes a security issue? Security issue ki itni height kyun hoti hai? Security issues are security issues because they are existential. Security issue वो होता है जिससे मेरी वजूद के ऊपर सवाल है, मेरे I will die. Because security
आप
issue.
मुझे एक जुमला कहने की इजाजत देंगे?
जी.
क्या ह्यूमन सिक्योरिटी एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट में अब शामिल हो गया?
बिल्कुल हो गया. देखिए ना, अगर सिक्योरिटी मेरी स्टेट की है और मैं मर गया तो फिर राइट, सो दैट
आप मर नहीं गए, अगर आप कमजोर हैं, आपके पास तालीम नहीं है, आपके पास अपॉर्चुनिटी गैप है.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल एग्जैक्टली, मैं मरने वाली तो एक्सट्रीम बात कर रहा हूँ. सो द पॉइंट आई एम ट्राइंग टू मेक हियर इज कि व्हेन समथिंग बिकम्स एग्जिस्टेंशियल इट बिकम्स अ सिक्योरिटी इशू, व्हिच इज व्हाई द डिफरेंस बिटवीन सिक्योरिटी इशू एंड एवरी अदर पॉलिसी इशू इज दिस इज द ओनली पॉलिसी अरीना वेयर द क्वेश्चन ऑफ हाउ मच इट विल कॉस्ट इज नॉट रेलेवेंट. हम ये यूक्रेन में देख रहे हैं, हमने ये कोविड में देखा. When you are really threatened, you do not ask how much it will cost. You say first, jaan bachao, then we will figure it out, right? The best example is COVID. We in this country talk a lot about the cost of the Afghanistan war to the US, right? We say, okay, 2.6 trillion. And we think 2.6 trillion is a big number. It's not. If you want to see a security response, the US has spent in real dollars, I'm not talking impact, 6.8 trillion on COVID. If you think about the COVID response, even our own, that's what a security response looks like. Okay, mask lo to band kar do. Airport close. You're not going to come to me, I'm not going to go to you. I'm not going to share my ventilator with you. Right? So the security approach is existential. Now, I've taken too much time, but I do want to very quickly make this and end. The brilliance of this security document is that it says, now let us look at the existential challenges to Pakistan, whether they be military or not, and then apply a security approach. So climate, for example, and again, मैं आपको ये छोड़ के जा रहूँगा. Climate, which is my both life's work and passion, is clearly an existential issue. Why? Because Pakistan is defined by two major forces. There are two major physical forces. One is called the Himalayas, one is called the monsoon. The monsoon comes, hits the Himalayas, has given you for 7,000 years a system. आप जहाज पे जाएं, brown, 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 एकदम green. That's the Indus. Now, if there is something that threatens these two things, Himalayas, glacial, melt, monsoon, that becomes existential. However, mitigation में हम कुछ ज़्यादा security का नहीं बिगाड़ सकते क्योंकि हमारी emission इतनी नहीं. So our mitigation security approach is, say to the foreign ministry, okay, go to the COP and get the other countries to reduce their emissions. We are going to focus on adaptation. Right? So what I'm trying to say is that the next step is, let us take our issues, open them up and say कि इसमें security का है. Two more and I'll shut up. Water I think is the cutting edge security issue of Pakistan amongst all security issues. Why? Because we are a water defined country by that Indus basin. Right? I'll give this example. Maybe people will. I hope people do not misread into this. From the same book, 2003 Wali. At that time, we did a back of the envelope calculation. India-Pakistan conflicts until then, nearly I think at 50 years mein, the total number of Pakistanis, a total number of Indians killed by the Pakistan side in 50 years of conflict was less than the number of children only in 1 year only who would die because of dirty water only. Exactly same number is true for Karachi, Pakistan. our question, our security policy question was, एक कोई non-traditional मरा था, एक traditional मरा था. Why is a child who dies at the wrong end of a gun any different from the child who dies at the wrong end of a tap? Right? आपकी security वहाँ है ना, लेकिन एक को हम deal करते हैं differently, दूसरे को हम deal करते हैं differently. The beauty of this is, please allow me, I hope I'm not trespassing on wrong ground here. The beauty of this, at that point, saving one life because of clean water, either in Karachi or in Delhi, was about $18.50. Right? So, aapko jo security leverage mil rahi hai, that's it. So, there are many things. Absolute last example, geoeconomics, right? It is a mistake to think that every economic issue that is international is geoeconomic. Nahi hai. 71 की war में पान आने बंद हो गए थे. But that wasn't a strategic issue. लेकिन जब गंदम आनी बंद होती है या तेल आना बंद होता है, right? That becomes a security issue. So the question has to be, okay, where are the insecurity levels? IMF का हम जिक्र करते हैं. Our general approach, the geopolitical approach to IMF loans has been, we are dependent to a large extent, we have made ourselves dependent on international loan. The geopolitical approach has been, remain friends with major powers so that they help you with IMF. The geo-economic approach will be, look at your loan portfolio so that you are not dependent on loans. Right? So, too long, I apologize and I'm really grateful.
आपसे एक सवाल मैं और पूछूंगी और फिर ताहिर साहब को ज़हमत दूंगी. आपने सुबह बाजवा साहब की स्पीच भी सुनी. उन्होंने कहा हाँ इशू है, बहुत बड़ा इशू है. पाकिस्तान हार्ट कंट्री में वो कहते हैं ना टेररिज्म का मसला है ना किसी और चीज़ का मसला है. इट्स द इन्वायरमेंट. वन पॉलिसी एडवाइस फॉर पाकिस्तान, वी आर प्लांटिंग द ट्रीज. द मिलिट्री इज ऑल्सो प्लांटिंग द ट्रीज. इमरान खान साहब इज ऑल्सो हैज दैट इनिशिएटिव. But you're still a coal-dependent country. One policy advice for Pakistan.
तो कितना अच्छा था.
चलिए एक अच्छी सी बात बता दीजिए.
Read this document. No, but seriously, take it seriously.
Okay.
What I mean by that, take it seriously, cut into every word and ask the difficult questions. And the difficult question is, can Pakistan be secure without Pakistanis feeling secure? And
Very
then ask
good.
Pakistanis कि तुम्हें डर कब लगता है? जब नौकरी जाती, जब बीमारी होती है, जब पानी नहीं होता,
या जब गर्मी से लोग मर जाते हैं.
जब गर्मी से लोग मर जाते हैं,
बिल्कुल.
जब बच्चों को तालीम नहीं मिलती. That's the security question. तो बड़ा सीधा सा है. Security question सिर्फ एक है, क्या हाल है? How are you? If the answer is I am well.
तो security is your and mine sense of well-being. अशरफी साहब, आप मुश्किल काम कर रहे हैं. आप माशरे में हारमोनी लाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. इंटरफेथ हार्मनी भी और इंट्राफेथ हार्मनी भी. हम जब यहाँ बात करते हैं तो हम ये भी बात करते हैं कि ये एक ऐसा फोरम है जहाँ हम ऐसी चीज़ों के हवाले से बात करें जिसके हवाले से पाकिस्तान में के लिए बहुत गलत फहमियाँ हैं या पाकिस्तान का इमेज इम्पैक्ट होता है. और मैं आपसे बहुत प्रोवोकेटिव बात करूँगी. उसमें से एक बात है हमारा ब्लास्फेमी लॉ और उसके नतीजे में होने वाली सड़क पे सूरत हाल. आप इस हवाले से क्या बताएंगे हमें?
Sorry, आप बहुत माजरत के साथ if I can go off एक personal crisis थोड़ा सा है.
Najam has a fan. Thank you so much for staying back.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala khatamil mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. सबसे पहले तो मैं अपने भाई डॉक्टर मुई यूसुफ साहब का और उनकी तमाम टीम का शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ और आप तमाम मेहमानों का भी और मेज़बानों का भी. हमने आपसे बहुत कुछ कल से सीखा है और इंशाअल्लाह मज़ीद आगे सीखेंगे. बिलाशुबा जो पाकिस्तान जैसे ममालिक हैं वहाँ पर बैनुल मज़ाहिब और बैनुल मसालिक हमांगी या मुकालमा की बात बड़ा मुश्किल काम है. और फिर हम तो गुज़श्ता 42 साल से तकरीबन एक ऐसी जंग में हैं कि जो जिस जंग की ईंधन यही चीज़ है. خواہ وہ فرقہ وارانہ تشدد ہو، خواہ وہ بین المذاہب کلیش ہو۔ اب اس کو ہم نے کیسے ٹھیک کرنا ہے اور اس میں بہتری کیسے آ رہی ہے، اس کا ایک ہی راستہ ہے، وہ ہے مکالمہ اور ریاست کا قانون کی عملداری پر کھڑے ہو جانا۔ بدقسمتی یہ ہے کہ ہمارے ہاں اگر ہمارے ریاستی ادارے کھڑے ہوتے ہیں تو ہماری سیاسی قیادت مصلحتوں کا شکار ہو جاتی ہے، اور اگر سیاسی قیادت کو کھڑا کرنے کی کوشش کرتے ہیں تو کہیں نہ کہیں پر جو ہے ہمیں کمپرومائز کرنا پڑتا ہے کہ حالات خراب نہ ہو جائیں۔ اب میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ گزشتہ سال دو سے ایک بہت اچھی تبدیلی آئی ہے، اور وہ یہ ہے کہ ہماری ریاست کے ادارے جو ہیں اور ہماری حکومت جو ہے اور پولیٹیکل قیادت میں بھی 100% تو نہیں ہم کہہ سکتے، لیکن آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں کہ 60% یہ ایک اویئرنیس آ گئی ہے کہ اگر ہم نے اس طرف توجہ نہ دی تو بہت نقصان ہو جائے گا۔ یہی وجہ ہے کہ آج مجھے بڑی خوشی ہے یہ آپ کو بتاتے ہوئے کہ گزشتہ 14 ماہ کے اندر پاکستان میں ایک بھی جو توہین مذہب یا توہین ناموس رسالت کا غلط کیس ہے وہ اندراج اس کا نہیں ہو سکا۔ اور ہمارا جو پنجاب میں ایک متحدہ علماء بورڈ ہے جس میں چاروں مکاتب فکر کے بڑے مقتدر حضرات ہیں، اور اس کو پہلی مرتبہ ہم نے یہ کیا کہ اسلامی مکاتب فکر کے علاوہ جو ہمارے ملک کے اندر جو ہے دوسرے مذاہب کے لوگ ہیں، خواہ وہ مسیحی ہیں، خواہ وہ ہندو ہیں، سکھ ہیں، ان کو بھی اپنے ساتھ بٹھایا، اور 117 مختلف کیسز ہمارے پاس آئے جن میں کوئی توہین مذہب کا تھا، توہین رسالت کا تھا، یا کوئی اس طرح سے۔ اس میں ہم نے باہمی بات چیت سے 113 میں لوگوں کو ریلیف دیا، 113 میں لوگوں کو کہا۔ اس کے ساتھ ساتھ ہم یہ پیغام پاکستان ایک دستاویز جو میں سمجھتا ہوں آئین پاکستان کے بعد ایک بڑی مضبوط دستاویز ہے جو بڑی محنت سے تیار ہوئی ہے، اور جس پہ طے کر دیا گیا ہے کہ فتویٰ کون دے سکتا ہے، ملک کے اندر نظام کیسے چلے گا۔ پیغام پاکستان کی روشنی میں ہم نے کوشش کی، اور آپ نے دیکھا ہوگا کہ جب یہ سری لنکا والا واقعہ ہوا، وہ ایک بیچارہ سری لنکن سیالکوٹ میں، تو پورے ملک میں ایک کنسنسس آیا کہ نہیں بھائی یہ چیز قابل قبول نہیں ہے۔ معاشرے کے اندر محراب و منبر سے، میڈیا سے، اور آپ جیسے جو یہاں پر بہت سارے حضرات جو ہیں ایسے ہیں کہ جن کے پاس بڑی قوت ہے، طاقت ہے، ایک بات کی ضرورت ہے کہ یہ قرآن کا بھی ہمیں حکم ہے کہ لکم دینکم ولی دین، کہ تمہارے لیے تمہارا دین ہے، ہمارے لیے ہمارا دین ہے۔ ہمیں اپنے معاشرے کو گراس روٹ لیول کے اوپر جو ہے، جیسے ابھی ہم کر رہے ہیں پیغام پاکستان امن کمیٹیاں ہم بنا رہے ہیں، اس کا مقصد کیا ہے کہ اگر ایک یونین کونسل کی سطح کے اوپر 4 مساجد ہیں، 4 مکتبہ فکر ہے ہمارے، ایک چرچ ہے، ایک گردوارہ ہے یا مندر ہے، اور یہ 15-20 لوگ مہینے میں 15 دن بعد ایک دوسرے کے ہاں آنا جانا شروع کر دیں گے تو بہت ساری چیزیں جو غلط فہمی کی صورت میں پیدا ہوتی ہیں وہ ختم ہو جائیں گی، اور ایک دوسرے کی محبت پیدا ہوگی، جو کہ ہمارے ہاں تھی اس معاشرے میں یہ 15-20 سالوں میں شدت آئی۔ اس کے ساتھ قانون کی بالادستی جو سب سے زیادہ ضروری ہے، اور جس میں ہم کمپرومائز کر جاتے ہیں، ڈر جاتے ہیں، خوف کھا جاتے ہیں۔ میں آپ کو چھوٹی سی ایک مثال دینا چاہتا ہوں کہ جس دن پشاور میں چرچ میں خودکش حملے ہوئے تو صبح کوئی دوپہر کے وقت وہ ہوئے تھے، تو کوئی شام 4-5 بجے تک ہر ٹی وی چینل پہ میں ہی تھا، تو میں تھک گیا، تو میں نے کہا یار کسی اور سے بھی بات کریں۔ تو ایک بڑے ٹی وی چینل کے جو مالک تھے ان کا مجھے فون آیا، انہوں نے کہا حافظ صاحب کوئی اور بات کرنے کو تیار ہی نہیں ہے، خوف ہے۔ لیکن آج وہ خوف نہیں ہے، آج آپ دیکھتے ہیں کہ الحمدللہ بہت سارے لوگ آ کے بات کر رہے ہیں، اور ان قوتوں کو، ان لوگوں کو کہ جو ایک خوف و ہراس کی کیفیت جنہوں نے پیدا کر دی تھی وہ ختم ہو رہی ہے۔ ہمیں سچی بات ہے کہ اپنے ریاستی اداروں کے ساتھ اس معاملے میں بھی کھڑا ہونا ہوگا، اور ہمیں خود بھی جو سب سے بڑا ہمارا میں یہ بات محسوس کرتا ہوں، میرا مدرسے سے تعلق ہے, مولوی کا بیٹا ہوں, مولوی کا پوتا ہوں, ناسا ہوں, لیکن الحمدللہ جب میں مدرسے سے فارغ ہوا میرے والد صاحب نے مجھے کہا, میں پنجاب یونیورسٹی گیا, بی اے جرنلزم کیا, انہوں نے کہا نہیں مسجد سے تنخواہ نہیں لوگے, اپنا کاروبار کرو گے اور دین کی خدمت کرو گے. اب ہمارا پرابلم یہ ہو گیا ہے کہ ہم نے سب کچھ مولوی پہ چھوڑ دیا ہے. ہم کہتے ہیں مولوی صاحب جانے اور ہمارا نہیں, یہ قرآن, یہ دین, یہ شریعت, اور اللہ ہمارا رب العالمین ہے, وہ رب المسلمین, یہ رب المومنین نہیں ہے. اور اللہ تبارک و تعالیٰ نے جب رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کو پکارا تو کہا وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِّلْعَالَمِينَ, دونوں جہانوں کے لیے آپ کو رحمت بنا کر بھیجا, رحمت للمسلمین نہیں ہے. ہمیں خود بھی دین کو پڑھنا چاہیے. اور جہاں پر اگر ہماری مسجد کے جو نمازی ہیں اور ہماری مسجد میں جانے والے جو لوگ ہیں, جس دن انہوں نے یہ سوال کھڑا کر دیا کہ مولانا صاحب یہ جو آپ بات کر رہے ہیں یہ قرآن و سنت کے خلاف ہے, یہ قرآن و حدیث میں نہیں ہے, اس دن ہم بہت اچھے راستے پر
مولانا
چل
صاحب
پڑے.
میں اسی بات کی طرف آنا چاہ رہی تھی. بہت سارے بہت بڑے مسلم ممالک میں منبر کو مانیٹر کیا جاتا ہے کہ جس طرح کے خطبے دیے جائیں وہ اسٹیٹ اس پہ نظر رکھتی ہے, اور ہیٹ سپیچ اور بلاسفیمی کا غلط استعمال کے لیے بہت دفعہ منبر استعمال ہوتا ہے. اس حوالے سے ہم نے کیا سٹیپس لیے ہیں, کیا سٹیپس لے رہے ہیں, کیا ہم منبر کو ریگولیٹ کرنے کے لیے تیار ہیں؟
دیکھیے میں آپ سے گزارش کروں, یہ جو پیغام پاکستان دستاویز ہے نا, اس پہ تقریباً اب تک 15,000 ملک کے ممتاز علماء مفتیان دستخط کر چکے. اور یہ جو آپ نے بات کی, اس کا پہلا نقطہ یہ ہے کہ نہ نفرت پھیلائیں گے, نہ وہ, میں اس کا ترجمہ یہ کرتا ہوتا ہوں کہ اس کا مقصد پیغام پاکستان کا یہ ہے کہ اپنا مسلک چھوڑو نہیں, دوسرے کے مسلک کو چھیڑو نہیں, اور دوسرا یہ ہے کہ جیو اور جینے دو. ہمیں یہی میں عرض کر رہا ہوں کہ ریاستی ادارے جو ہیں وہ آ کے کھڑے ہو گئے, انہوں نے ہمارا ساتھ دیا, لیکن اب ہمیں کھڑا ہونا ہے. اب ہر مسجد میں اسپیشل برانچ کا آدمی جا کے کھڑا نہیں ہو سکتا, ہر مسجد میں سی ٹی ڈی والا نہیں پہنچ سکتا ہے. وہاں جو اس مسجد میں بیٹھا ہوا ہے اس کو دیکھنا چاہیے کہ یہ جو خطبہ دے رہا ہے, تقریر کر رہا ہے, یہ کتنا, اس میں نفرت کی بات کتنی ہے. اور اگر وہ شکایت کے لیے کھڑا ہو جائے گا تو یہ بالکل حالات معمول پہ آ جائیں گے. میں آپ کو ایک چھوٹی سی اس کی مثال دیتا ہوں کہ سن 2004-05 میں جب یہاں بہت قتل و قتال تھی, میں پنجاب میں اس وقت ایڈوائزر تھا, ہم نے طے کیا کہ جس مسجد سے, امام بارگاہ سے, مجلس سے, اجتماع سے تقریر کافر کافر کا نعرہ اس وقت لگتا تھا, اور دوسری طرف جو ہے وہ شدت سے مقدسات کی, دوسرے مکتبہ فکر کے کابر کی توہین ہوتی تھی, ہم نے کہا ہم خالی مولوی صاحب پہ پرچہ نہیں دیں گے, ہم اس مسجد کے, اس مجلس کے, اس امام بارگاہ کے, اس اجتماع کے کروانے والے پہ بھی پرچہ دیں گے. آپ یقین کر لیں صرف 3 پرچے ہم نے پنجاب میں, 3 FIR کاٹی, 2 نہیں 3 محرم, اور 2006 اور 7 کا محرم ایسا تھا جس میں کسی نے ایک دوسرے کے خلاف FIR ہی نہیں کروائی. تو اگر آپ قانون کی عملداری کروا لیں اور قوم بھی ساتھ دے, یہ خالی اس بنیاد, ہمارے پاس اتنا بڑا نظام نہیں ہے کہ ہر مسجد میں آپ اسپیشل برانچ والا کھڑا کریں گے, ہر مسجد میں آپ CTD والا کھڑا کریں گے. اور ایک بڑا مسئلہ اس وقت سوشل میڈیا ہے. میں نے 100 کے قریب جو ہے چینلز یا کہہ لیں یوٹیوب کے, وہ ہم نے محرم سے پہلے درخواست کی یوٹیوب والوں سے, ہمارے بیچارے پیمرا والے بھی, PTA والے بھی, کہ جی یہ دیکھیں یہ سارا آگ ہے, اس سے ہمارا معاشرہ تباہ ہو رہا ہے, لیکن وہ نہیں بند کرتے ہیں, فیس بک والے نہیں بند کرتے ہیں. اور اگر گورنمنٹ بند کرے تو آزادی اظہار پہ پھر ہم بات کرتے ہیں, یہ بھی ایک بہت بڑا مسئلہ ہے.
اور بہت چیزیں بند کر دیتے ہیں, ویسے کشمیر پہ ڈسکورس بند کر دیتے ہیں, اور بھی دیگر چیزیں. آپ کو میں تھوڑی دیر میں اور زحمت دوں گی کیونکہ میں آپ سے کامنٹ چاہوں گی پاپولیشن کنٹرول کے حوالے سے. زیبا, میں آپ کی طرف آؤں گی. جو the entire discussion that we've had and all the presentations that we've had, they've been largely around how we need to do certain things on the human security front, including population control, and they've called it a ticking bomb. That's where the presentation ended on. But there is also this understanding that perhaps you need a lot of resources to handle that. In my conversation that I had with you on the television, you said it's not about resources. So I would like you to elaborate on that.
I have argued with you about it's not a question of resources, because just listening to the discourse here, referring back particularly to Dr. Adil Najam's comment, where we place our priorities is where it is. You see, basically, this ticking time bomb, the recommendations read out very ably and made by the Institute of Regional Studies were there 30, 40 years ago. We had the population projections that showed water scarcity, unemployment, the whole lot. But we did not really take any action, whereas other countries in the region, Bangladesh, Iran, Nepal, India, they have all really managed to come.
Many Muslim countries also.
And particularly Muslim countries. I wanted to highlight Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Iran. And now Saudi Arabia as well. So it is not an issue, basically it has not been an issue of priority. And just in listening to the discourse, it occurred to me, perhaps there's an underlying reason. And I come across the debate, and just for the sake of taking this argument further, that perhaps there was a large enough section, and I do come across that thinking, that actually thought that going from 6th to 5th most populous was a good thing. That large numbers were a good thing because we were then going to be strong. What was overlooked was exactly what Dr. Adil Najam talked about, our infant mortality rate, our maternal mortality rate, 20 out of million, 20 million children out of school. And that is the disconnect with the constitutional rights that were shown very clearly. I think that we should really be thinking of it, population as, part of health. It's part of family planning services should be compulsorily part of health. They are not being provided by the health sector. And as you rightfully say, we are spending, somebody said that we are spending $10 on health. Well, we have calculated that we are spending 30 cents per person in Pakistan last year on family planning services. So basically, it's not been a priority.
We need to notch it up by how much? We're spending 30 cents right now. How can we prevent the ticking of the bomb? How much do we notch it up by?
By making it a priority. And frankly speaking, if it is not a priority in everyone's minds, if it is just lettered and penned into the national security policy, I don't think it's enough. I think we need more of a consensus across various sections saying that, there ought to be a balance between, there is a new narrative, actually, Jabbar Saab contributed towards it, that population and resources, there ought to be a balance between them. And the balance is out.
And हम इस वक्त जो कुछ कर रहे हैं वो क्या हमारी population growth negate करती है? ज़ेबा
मेरे ख्याल से जो हम कर रहे हैं वो नाकाफ़ी है. और हालांकि मैं कहती हूँ कि मजहबी जो हमारे स्कॉलर्स हैं उन्होंने हमारा पूरा साथ दिया है कि आप अगर इंसानियत को बचाने के लिए, औरतों, माँओं की और बच्चों की यानी जानें बचाने के लिए अगर आप बर्थ स्पेसिंग करती हैं तो there is really nothing, in fact our religion promotes it.
इस्लाम तो जिम्मेदारी की बात करता है ना, तो जिम्मेदारी के बगैर तो ये बात नहीं हो सकती. मैं आपके पास आऊँगी इस कमेंट के लिए. I need to factor in Aisha's point of view into the discussion. Aisha, we've been hearing about environment all day today. In fact, we almost put General Bajwa on the defensive this morning. He said, this is not my domain. However, it seems to be a theme that is constantly there. And whether we talk about food security, whether we talk about water security, and then yes, human security, can we really have a trust unless we look differently at environment with a different lens altogether?
Thank you, Dr. Baqai. I think first I'd like to thank the National Security Division for inviting civil society and giving us a space to be part of the security dialogue. I also want to thank the 5 presenters because we are going to base our conversation on their findings and the recommendations that they have made. Dr. Adil Najam gave his definition of security, and I'd like to add on to that to say that security can be predicated by a nation's ability to absorb shocks and respond to fragility and crisis. And this makes economic resilience and human security at the heart of a security dialogue. But a national security policy is a living document, so it has to be contextualized in the times that we're living in. And right now, the changing geopolitical landscape, the importance of geoeconomics, and the threats of climate change are the three main determinants. After the Cold War, we've gone through over 2 decades of a unipolar world. But now we see China emerging as the second pole, and we also see an assertive Russia that's staking its claim. So in the future, we may be looking at a tripolar world. And at present, if we say that, we are not going to take sides with any of the poles, we may have to position ourselves in a way to deal with 3 poles to secure our socio-economic security. Now I'll come to climate change, because that is actually my expertise. And Dr. Adil Najam talked about, water, hydrology, and the transboundary aspect of the threat that we face. So there is no domain left now that is not affected by climate change. You mentioned food, water, energy disasters, you name it, livelihoods. So I am going to just, because of shortage of time, focus on 2 things, hydrology and hotspots, because those are the 2 aspects of climate change that are going to affect us directly. Now, when we talk about water, we have to recognize that we are a single basin, lower riparian country reliant on transboundary water. And when we talk about hotspots, we have to remember that South Asia is warming up more rapidly than the rest of the world. And there is about 800 million people that are projected to be at risk by 2030, 2040. So how are we going to address these issues without regional cooperation? We have outstanding issues, we recognize those. We have pending issues that have been unresolved for 7.5 decades, but we have to settle those through a negotiated arrangement that is acceptable to all parties. We don't have that same luxury of time when it comes to climate change. The 6th assessment report that has just come out tells us that 2030 is the critical milestone. If we do not arrest climate change, bring temperature under control, we are going to have consequences that will not be managed by adaptive resilience. So we have to look at it from this perspective.
Glasgow was a disappointment, wasn't
Glasgow
it?
was, yes, in many ways, from the perspective of the developing countries. But I think that the question that I asked that you referred to, General Bajwa, was do we need to decouple politics now from all those other areas in which engagement can contribute to social well-being and economic prosperity? And I think one of the ways to do that, because the issue becomes a little controversial, is to maybe apply the principles of Schelling's theory of game theory of change. And look at it from that perspective and plot 2 trajectories for ourselves. One as business as usual, and the other one with some changed approaches. And then do a cost-benefit analysis to see what is it that is acceptable to the country, what is it that is acceptable to the people, what are the prices and consequences of that, and then take that agenda forward, because it will have consensus.
The best point that you've made is that environment is an issue of collective goods. There are no individual solutions, there are no individual options.
ये जो आबादी का बढ़ता हुआ मसला है ना, ये सबसे बड़ा मसला है हमारा, और इसमें शरीयत की रूह से भी असल मसला ये है कि हमारी इस पर जो है जितनी भी तवज्जो है वो हम मेडिकली या उस अंदाज से करते हैं, शरई एतबार से इसके ऊपर बड़ी मेहनत की ज़रूरत है। और दूसरा जहालत है, बेटी पैदा हो गई तो उसके बाद बेटे के उसमें, तो इसके ऊपर एक मुस्तकिल मेहनत की ज़रूरत है, जो मेरा ख्याल है हमारे वजारतों की और हमारे जो इससे मुत्तसिल इदारे हैं ना, उनकी इस तरफ बिल्कुल तवज्जो नहीं।
जो पेट्रियार्कल सोसाइटी कंस्ट्रक्ट है वो कंट्रीब्यूट करता है। प्लीज गो अहेड विद योर क्वेश्चन जेंटलमैन।
माय नेम इज इंजीनियर वसीम अब्बासी। माय क्वेश्चन टू ऑल पैनलिस्ट। एक पाकिस्तान का जो कॉमन सिटीजन वो इस वक्त ये समझता है कि पाकिस्तान की जो तमाम स्टेट रिसोर्सेज हैं दे आर लीड कैप्चर्ड, और उसमें सिविलियन एलीट है, मिलिट्री एलीट है, बिजनेस एलीट है, दे हैव कैप्चर्ड ऑन ऑल दी स्टेट रिसोर्सेज। और इसमें हमारा एजुकेशन हो गया, हेल्थ हो गया, जस्टिस सिस्टम, दिस हैज बिकम एन एक्सॉर्बिटेंट परचेजिंग कमोडिटी एंड इट कैन ओनली बी कैप्चर्ड बाय एलीट ऑफ द स्टेट। and common citizen is not getting services of the state. So how do you think that this national security policy can be realized? This is just a wishful document.
Okay, he thinks it's a wishful document, but he also says that we've commodified education and healthcare, and perhaps that is the reason why it's not a right but a privilege. And who would like to respond to that?
Well, I would like to say that, distribution has not been equitable, but the unsustainable population growth rate has been a contributing factor. Imagine if we were half the number, we would have more resources to allocate for every sector. So therefore, it's not the population that's the problem. It is the access to resources that you have and how equitably you distribute them in society. Because eventually, if we keep growing at this rate, the gap that you're talking about between the rich and the poor will keep increasing, and it will lead to societal strife and conflict. So it's very, very important that we stop right here and we spread those resources more evenly across society.
Okay. Zeba, would you like to add to that discourse?
I think it's a very basic question, whether you call it elite capture or not, but jo distance hai na, the distance between the people who are making the decisions about resources, where they should go, and even their perception and knowledge about what people want is getting huger and huger in the last 10, 20 years that I've been doing research. And I think that people want a different life. For instance, population ke liye, ہمیشہ یہ کہا جاتا ہے کہ غریب لوگ بہت بچے پیدا کر رہے ہیں. Maybe they're doing it out of insecurity to some extent, but a large extent they're not doing it. They're doing it because they don't have access to education, to health, to food, to information, all the things.
Or to even family planning.
اور family planning services تو پہنچتے ہی نہیں.
وہ بھی نہیں.
تو میرے خیال سے بہت that's a very, very unjust thing to put the responsibility families کی طرف ہے, مگر اسٹیٹ نے ایبڈیکیٹ کر دی ہے رسپانسبلٹی ٹوٹلی.
لیکن یہ جو سیکیورٹی ڈائلاگ ہے یہ اسی طرف ایک قدم ہے کہ یہ جو فاصلہ ہے اس کو ہم پر کر سکیں اور آپ کی بات ایوانوں تک پہنچ سکے. جی یس پلیز گو ہیڈ.
السلام علیکم. میرا سوال علامہ طاہر اشرفی صاحب سے ہے. شرعی روح سے کسی کے اوپر تکفیر لگانا, اس کے قواعد ہیں, قاضی کا رول ہے, ریاست کا رول ہے. کیا وجہ ہے نمبر 1 کہ علماء اس کے اوپر خاموش ہیں, پاکستان میں اس کے اوپر بات نہیں کرتا, ٹی وی پہ آ کے کوئی بات نہیں کرتا. اور دوسری بات یہ ہے کہ عوام و ناس میں جو غلط روایت چلی ہوئی ہے کہ ہر کوئی کسی پہ لگا دیتا ہے, جو کہ قطعاً غیر شرعی ہے, غیر فقہی ہے, اس کے اوپر آگاہی کیوں نہیں دی جاتی کہ کوئی 12, 13, 14 سال کا بچہ بچی جو ہے وہ بھی کسی پہ تکفیر لگا دیتے ہیں. اور خاص طور پہ نان مسلمس کے اوپر علیحدہ قواعد ہیں کہ اس کے اوپر لگ بھی سکتی ہے کہ نہیں لگ سکتی. مسلمان کے اوپر اگر خدا نخواستہ ایسا الزام لگتا ہے تو 1, 2, 3 بار اس کو بلایا جاتا ہے, اسے کہا جاتا ہے کہ اپنے الفاظ واپس لے لو. ہمارے سلاف یہی کرتے آئے تھے جو کہ ہم سے بہت بہتر مسلمان تھے. تو آج جو یہ غلط روایت ہے اس کے پیچھے علماء کا کیا رول ہے, اور عوام و ناس میں جو روایت ہے اس کو کس کی ذمہ داری بنتی ہے اس کو صحیح کرنا. شکریہ.
پہ ڈسکشن ہوئی ہے اسلام آباد سیکیورٹی ڈائلاگ کے حوالے سے. اس میں اگر ہم ایک علیحدہ سے تناظر میں دیکھیں کہ خواتین اس میں جو چیلنجز درپیش ہیں اس میں اپنا کتنا امپورٹنٹ رول ادا کر سکتی ہیں, کیونکہ ہم دیکھ رہے ہیں کہ پاکستان ہو یا سب کانٹیننٹ کیا یا ساؤتھ ایشیا کی بات کریں تو اگر اوورآل ہم اس سیکیورٹی کا مختلف فوڈ سیکیورٹی بھی آ جاتی ہے, اس میں دیگر معاملات بھی آ جاتے ہیں, تو ایک رول جو خواتین کا وہ کیسے ادا کر سکتے ہیں؟
خواتین ہی صحیح کریں گی. اشرفی صاحب
آپ نے جو بات کہی بالکل درست بات ہے. پہلی بات تو یہ ہے ہماری بدقسمتی ہے پاکستان کی. ہمارے ہاں کوئی دارالفتاء جس طرح سعودی عرب ہے, وہاں حرمین شریفین کا جو امام ہے شیخ عبد الرحمن السدیس, جو دونوں حرموں میں امامت کرواتا ہے, وہ فتویٰ جاری نہیں کر سکتا. اگر وہ فتویٰ دے گا تو دارالفتاء سے سٹیمپ ہوگا, پھر وہ فتویٰ چلے گا. مصر ہے, باقی دنیا اسلام ہے. پاکستان کے اندر بدقسمتی ہے کہ اس طرح کی کوئی اتھارٹی ہے نہیں ہے. ہماری ایک اسلامی نظریاتی کونسل ہے, لیکن اس کا آپ کو میرے سے زیادہ بہتر حال پتہ ہوگا. میں جب ماضی میں اس کا ممبر تھا تو میں نے 3 بار اس سے استعفیٰ دیا تھا. اس کی سارے کا سارا فوکس 12 ممبر, 20 میں سے 12 ممبر تو 3 سال صرف یہی بولے تھے کہ کچھ ٹی اے ڈی اے بڑھا دیں جی, کوئی ٹور پہ لے جائے, جو آپ کی اتھارٹی ہے. اس کے اوپر پیغام پاکستان میں یہ چیزیں طے ہو گئی ہیں. اب مسئلہ وہ ہے جو میں نے پہلے کہا کہ معاشرے سے لوگ کب اٹھیں گے. اگر معاشرے سے لوگ اٹھ جائیں, اور میں یہ آپ کو کہہ سکتا ہوں کہ 40% تو ایسے لوگ ہیں جو فتوے دینے والے جن کو قل هو اللہ کا ترجمہ بھی نہیں آتا, لیکن ہم ان کا مانتے ہیں. بدقسمتی یہ ہے کیونکہ ہم خود دین کو نہیں پڑھتے ہیں. یہ قرآن اتنا ہی میرا ہے جتنا آپ کا ہے, اتنا ہی کسی پیر صاحب کا ہے. اگر لوگ شعور کی طرف آ جائیں تو یہ فتوے بازی بند ہو جائے گی. قانون موجود ہے, یا لوگ قانون کا راستہ اختیار کر لیں. اور تکفیر کی جو آپ نے بات کی, تو اللہ تبارک و تعالیٰ نے قرآن کریم میں, رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے اپنی احادیث کے ذریعے ہمیں بتا دیا ہے کہ جو اللہ کی توحید کا ماننے والا ہے, رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی رسالت و ختم نبوت کا ماننے والا ہے, اصحاب رسول و اہل بیت سے کی تکفیر نہیں کرتا ہے, حتیٰ کہ عام مسلمان کی تکفیر جو ہے, یعنی رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے فرمایا اگر کسی نے کسی مسلمان کو کافر کہا تو خود کافر ہو جائے گا. بدقسمتی ہے ہم یہ نہیں بتاتے. کوشش کرتے ہیں, جیسے میں نے پہلے کہا, ذرائع ابلاغ میں میرے بھائی فواد صاحب نے بڑی محنت کی ہے, چوئی صاحب آ گئے ہیں, تو تھوڑا سا ذرائع ابلاغ پہ جگہ ملی ہے ہمیں جہاں ہم آ کے یہ کھل کے باتیں کر لیتے ہیں. لیکن ہمارے ذرائع ابلاغ بھی ڈرتے ہیں, کیونکہ پھر آپ کو پتا ہے کہ ڈنڈا لے کے لوگ باہر آ جاتے ہیں. لیکن انشاءاللہ حالات پہلے سے بہت بہتر ہے. میں آپ کو بتاؤں, پہلے بین المذاہب مکالمہ کی بات کرنا جرم تھا, آج ہم اوپنلی بات بھی کر رہے ہیں, ایک دوسرے سے مل بھی رہے ہیں. ابھی آپ نے دیکھا بشپ آف کینٹبری وہ آئے پاکستان کا دورہ کر کے, اور جاتے ہوئے انہوں نے مجھے ایئرپورٹ پہ کہا کہ میرا پاکستان کے بارے میں خیال ہی بدل گیا ہے کہ یہ جو ہم تو انشاءاللہ تھوڑی ہمت کرنی پڑے گی, سب کچھ ٹھیک ہو جائے گا. بہت شکریہ.
عائشہ, تھینک یو فار جوائننگ اس. رشید صاحب آپ کا بہت بہت شکریہ. زیبا ستار صاحب آپ کا شکریہ. عادل نجم صاحب نے بھی ہمیں جوائن کیا تھا. Thank you for this session comes to an end. Thank you so much.